This is the Coffee Report with Bobo, the 9th of May, 2026. I apologize for my absence. I'm getting resituated in a new time zone in a new city. The audio also might be bad. Still working on redoing my recording settings. Unlike my standard daily brief, this one is going to be focusing solely on the biology of a disease. Note, I'm a molecular bioscientist, not an epidemiologist or virologist. Because of that, I briefed myself by going to Google Scholar and looking at the historic work on this particular disease. I checked with the WHO and read their briefings like I do with things in my field. I looked into and checked with several virologists and epidemiologists. Basically, I let them keep me as a captive audience as they info dumped their specialty to me. These examples are what we like to call reliable sources. Experts, the primary literature, and doctors working in their fields. They used informative presentation styles, cited their sources, and only used information that could be vetted. I also vetted their credentials. Some of that was easy, as I had worked with them before. What I didn't use was celebrities, politicians, people using an emotional hook presentation style, the comment sections on a YouTube or a TikTok, anything involving Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Guys, raw milk mommy bloggers who are trad wives can comment that they are an epidemiologist just as easily as the head of the biology department at a leading university. So if someone is saying something, look to see if they can back that up with their posts, okay? This is not a hypothetical example. I am pulling that directly from a woman commenting on a chief medical officer's public outreach post. I don't believe someone who is an anti-vaxxer can also be a practicing epidemiologist, but I do believe that they can comment fear-driven misinformation and get thousands of updates. So with those clarifications for context, I will first discuss the World Health Organization's disease outbreak news from the 9th of May. After that, we will transition to discussing key biological, epidemiological, and virological aspects of the topic at hand. Here's our topic. A link in the image for your further review is included. On May 2nd, yay, the reports came in on my birthday. A cluster of passengers with severe respiratory illness on a cruise ship were reported to the WHO disease tracking. As of the 8th of May, a total of 8 cases with 3 deaths have been recorded among this subpopulation. Case 1 was an elderly Dutch man touring South America and taking a cruise, who developed severe respiratory illness after spending extensive time in animal tours and birdwatching events in Argentina, Chile, and Uruguay. He passed before sequencing could be used. Case 2, his wife, also developed severe gastrointestinal complications. She was medevaced to Johannesburg after her symptoms deteriorated beyond the capabilities of the medical staff at the St. Helena facilities tending and quarantining her. She passed while being treated in Johannesburg. However, PCR sequencing was able to confirm that this was the Andes strain of the hantavirus. Case 3 developed symptoms and was exposed to case 1 and 2 on the ship. Cruise ships have close quarters with specific difficulties in maintaining sanitation. As such, it is somewhat common for diseases that have more difficult times transmitting from person to person to spread more easily in these tight subpopulations. Case 4, an adult female, developed symptoms on the 28th of April and passed. Samples were taken and sent with the medevaced patients to experts in the Netherlands. The disease was confirmed by PCR to be the Andes strain as well. Case 5 is the ship's doctor. He has been medevaced to the Netherlands and is reported to be in stable condition as of today and under quarantine as he receives palliative care. To define palliative care in this context, with this type of lung infection, the patient is quarantined, given pure oxygen, and IVs. No, antivirals are not administered. No, there are no vitamin treatments. They give you fluids and treat the symptoms while trying to keep your blood oxygen up and hope you pull through. Case 6 is an adult male who was working as a ship guide in direct contact with the other cases and the passengers as a whole. He reported mild symptoms and was medevaced with the ship's doctor. It was confirmed by PCR that
he has the Andes strain as well. He is stable condition as of the 8th in the Netherlands under palliative care and quarantine. Case 7, an adult male who disembarked from the cruise ship in St. Helena on the 22nd of April, not showing any symptoms before the reports. He flew back to Switzerland through South Africa and Qatar, and on the 1st of May developed symptoms. He reported to medical professionals in Switzerland and is quarantined while receiving palliative care. Case 8 is an adult male who disembarked on the 14th of April. Symptoms emerged on the 28th. He is quarantined, receiving palliative care, and is being tracked as a probable case until PCR confirmation is achieved. Now, the previously reported flight attendant was considered a possible human-to-human transmission. The attendant is being treated, and PCR and serology tests come back negative for hantavirus. Shocker of shocks, a flight attendant having to be in a small tube for 20 hours in close proximity on a transatlantic flight developed the flu. They are still being monitored and tracked for their health and for the public safety just in case. Upon alerting the WHO of a cluster of unknown respiratory illnesses on a cruise ship, the medical experts responsible for tracking disease spread began their contact tracing protocols. This organization has been working with governmental organizations and other public health groups to develop a network map of contacts to the individuals of interest. The WHO is trying to get governments to coordinate and quarantine the individuals in proper biosafety facilities with respirators and trained experts. Political individuals, untrained social media influencers, right-wing conspiracy theorists, and those with political/racial/monetary or other motivations have been hampering this effort. Now let's talk biology. The hantavirus is a virus that is closely tied with mice as its standard host with a long history of study. See these two papers from 2002 and 2005 that go over its development in mice for evidence that this is a long-studied and tracked virus. In mice, which are its primary hosts, there are more than 20 viral species, host-specific, throughout the world. The variants group in a family tree with 3 main branches, one being the Americas branch, one being the European branch, and the final one being the Asian branch. The viruses themselves are closer in sequence to each other than they are of those on other branches. In the further reading, you can see that among mice populations, it is transmitted via infected waste particles. Many strains are mostly asymptomatic in mice, as this family of viruses are very adapted to their hosts. The public doesn't seem to realize that in the disease game, smart house guests don't burn their house down. So very adapted diseases often go through the route of asymptomatic in their reservoir species, before it's transmitted to something more susceptible. To define reservoir species in this context, a reservoir species is an organism that the disease can shelter in, grow, and mutate without causing undue deaths in the population, versus hosts where deaths occur often. Dead hosts means you can adapt and spread. These viruses can transmit to other species like cows, dogs, cats, moose, people, etc., via their contact with the mouse waste. Improper storage of things such as food, allowing the infected but asymptomatic mice to urinate or defecate in rice or wheat, for example, can be a contact point for humans. The disease was identified and named decades ago when an outbreak of hemorrhagic fever was tracked in NATO troops in the region of Korea that has the Hantan River. You get a bunch of troops getting a nasty blood disease from exposure to improperly stored food, and you name it after the river they're nearby. For context, that was in the 50s, my dudes. This is not a novel disease. The Andes strain shelters in rodents in the region around the Andes mountain, and it is the only strain that at this time can transmit from person to person via long personal contact. Even then, its R factor is rather low. All others require direct exposure to consumed fecal matter. To define R factor, this is a metric where we take and look at how many people an infected can infect and how easy it is to pass. Low R factor means it's much harder to infect a lot of people. Variables like if the disease can be coughed out of your lungs and stay active for a long time versus only being able to be transferred via bodily fluids, or how much disease shedding you do while you are asymptomatic, all play into this R factor. For context, the previous flu that everyone is comparing this to has peak viral shedding before you have symptoms. It was also an uncharacterized first-generation crossover event versus something we've been studying since the Korean War. This is a radically different situation, even though social media is saying it's the same. It is not. For the Andes hantavirus strain, we know peak viral shedding is at peak symptom expression, early in that expression. Its viral shedding typically is very low, near non-existent, during its long incubation period of several weeks to 8 weeks. So yes, the patients with the Andes variant of hantavirus shed virus, but are doing so when they are early in the expression of vomiting, shitting, having like 20% lung capacity because their lungs are filling up with pus and mucus, and have fevers that are insane. You're probably not in close proximity to someone violently expelling substances from every orifice simultaneously, Bethany, you tradwife social media guru. You can stop posting that snake oil advertisement, thank you very much. Is it crass of me to explain it that way? Yes, and I apologize to the family members and patients. However, I am tired of people saying that you can get this from walking by some random person unaware that they're infected. You can't. And shock, quite frankly, sticks. Since we finished discussing R factor and susceptibility, let's talk about infections in the world and try to armor you against scare tactics when people with a cough show up in your feed. So let's start with the Americas and this region specifically in 2025. We had 229 cases with a death rate of 25.7% in the Americas. The most recent data for the European region is from 2023 and had 1,885 cases for all of the EU. This is a very low rate. In Asia, most cases are focused in both China and Korea, for thousands of cases annually. However, they are dropping in rate as various prevention controls improve. The virus groups in both Europe and Asia typically have a much lower lethality than the infections from the American strain, with the European and Asian strains having between a 1% and a 15% lethality with supportive care. They have different symptoms. The Americas, with its lung complications, has a much higher lethality, approaching or exceeding 50%, depending on age. That is why the WHO is trying to get the exposed quarantined in facilities with the proper level of biosafety protocols and respirators to hold them for the 8 weeks needed to cover their incubation time, and away from those god-forsaken petri dishes of disease the rest of you call cruise ships. They are tight with recycled air and constant contact. They also lack the medical gear and PPE needed for the quarantines. Furthermore, you'd be surprised at how few rich old people wash their hands or like being told what they can and can't do. While the risk to the public is rated low by the metrics the WHO uses, the risk to the people on the boat currently is rated moderate. This is as reported by the data by the WHO on the before linked further readings. But Bobo, why should I care? Let them sit on that boat and what? Say it. Say it with your full chest. Say it to the guy who had to do triage. Go on. I give you permission to say it out loud. Oh, here's a script if you're tongue-tied. Ahem, and I quote, "They should die out of my sight, away from inconveniencing me and my fifis." Okay, if basic humanity eludes you, and you are fine with that as many posts seem to be, let me tell you a selfish reason to evac and quarantine them. While they are asymptomatic, they are not shedding viral load. When I wish to promote mutations in disease stock that I am studying, I let them transmit from host to host while adding a few variables to promote mutation, letting them run rampant through the host population unchecked. When I do it, they're cell cultures, not people. Leaving them on the boat does this with people. Guess what you are? You're a people too. If you have no empathy or ethics, may I appeal to your enlightened self-interest? Allow for the experts with the equipped facilities to limit cross-exposure, transporting subjects while they are not presenting symptoms and have extremely low risk of transmission, instead of waiting until you have a mass of coughing individuals that you try to panic transport. Limiting mutation risk, and yes, limiting all of our inconveniences as well. You can burn the boat after we get everyone off if it makes you feel better. Charge it to the owners as punishment or something. Finally, let's highlight some of the health claims and misinformation by the uninformed. There are no vaccines developed currently. Yes, Moderna has stated that they have been working on one since 2023. Yes, it takes time, especially when you have a disease on the back burner due to the demographics affected. Prevention with this particular variety relies on sanitation and the limiting of mouse waste in human food. No, ivermectin is not a treatment. With the Andes strain, it is the oxygen and IVs that keep the patient alive, and we hope for the best. Proper biosafety gear and quarantined prevent transmission during peak viral shed. Hosts shed very little while they are asymptomatic. No, this is not a new strain. This has been categorized for decades. No, this is not a new bioweapon. We have the sequence. It matches the ones in the wild, in the mice, in the region. 8-week incubation and super low R factor is crap for a bioweapon, by the way. You need fast incubation, high shedding, and high spread rates. Don't ask me why I know this. So that is the coffee report focusing on the WHO disease tracking brief for the 9th of May. I included the WHO sites for your further reading. Fun fact, that is where they update the experts. I have included other further readings to show that this isn't a new disease, but in fact something we have been looking at for years. No, it is not something new from the Umbrella Corps. Yes, this is a scary time. And yes, I do know who's in charge of the CDC right now. God in heaven, I know who's in charge more than you can fathom. Jesus. However, you should get your information from sources like the WHO and various biologists and virologists, like I and my colleagues do. Look for citations and vetting in their sources. Don't listen to some rando in the comment section. Political commentators and lifestyle reporters are not valid sources to take with no double checking. Remember, we also now live in the age of AI, so any weird video footage needs to be double checked as well. I've already had that uncomfortable discussion with a parent as well, so trust me, I know. Stay sane, my dudes. And as always, thank you for your time.